Hello and welcome to Austin Faith Dialogue. Today we're going to take a look at the intersection of business education and the whole notion of ethics. See if those two really go together and where the conflicts are. Stay with us for today's show, Austin Faith Dialogue.
Austin Faith Dialogue, at the crossroads of religion and life. A series highlighting the cultural and social interactions between the worshiping and religious communities in and around the capital city. Austin Faith Dialogue is brought to you by the Austin Metropolitan Ministries in cooperation with KXAN. Join us now in Austin Faith Dialogue.
We're glad you joined us for today's conversation. I'm Sandy Wilder, your host on Austin Faith Dialogue, and today our conversation will be with Dr. Roy Cabanis, who's head of the business division at Huston-Tillotson College. We're glad to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much for coming, Roy. And we'll be talking about business ethics, but I think first it might be helpful for people to know a little bit about, as chair of the business division, what your responsibilities are to get a sense of what you do, and then we'll get into the conversation. So what does a chair of a division do?
Well, first of all, you have to kind of organize, decide what's going to be coming down the pike, what it is we're going to do, to give some sort of strategic vision to what we're going to be trying to do. Mm-hmm. After you do that, then you go ahead and you have to address the priorities of your various accrediting agencies. We're trying for a higher level of accreditation now, which means that our students are going to have to do more, we're going to have to do more. Everybody does more. But to do that, you have to say, okay, you must cover the following things in your classes. And they insist, literally insist, that thou shalt cover ethics. You will have international components. You will have the mathematical components of what's happening in business. And so these are the kinds of things that you just simply say, hey, you're going to do it. You have to talk about it.
Right. So as an administrator, then you've got those overall responsibilities for the conduct of the program, the business curriculum.
Well, not only as an administrator, but also as a teacher. I wouldn't have taken this gig if they'd have said, get out of the classroom. I do this for love. I love to teach. If I didn't love to teach, I'd be making 3 times the money somewhere else. But not only there, but you have to give evidence of it. In other words, it does you no good to talk a talk if you don't walk the walk. You have to show, this is good behavior. This is what we can consider to be ethical. And you lead more by example than you do by lecture. Lecture's real easy to turn off. You've seen them out there. You're in class and they're sitting there and their hands are moving and their eyes are glazed and they're quiet and they're not, and it's going in one ear, out the other, and not encountering a single thing in between.
We've all experienced that from time to time in our undergraduate careers, I am sure, when we were just somewhere else. I wonder what it was in your background, and we'll talk a little bit more about the specific situation at Huston-Tillotson in just a minute. But what was it in your background, one, that led you into business, and what preparation did you get in your studies for teaching business and business ethics?
Okay. Well, in my background, what led me to business was 2 things. Number 1, my grandfather, who owned a chain of businesses. And number 2, the state of Oklahoma decided in their infinite wisdom that I was buying and selling too many cars not to have a license. And so I got a letter from the state saying, you have, in the last 3 months, you have bought and sold 82 cars. You must be a dealer. Please send us $150 for a dealer's license. And that was back when I was in about 9th grade or so. So I kind of started a little early. But, being in business led to that set of things. In terms of formal education, you really don't get a lot. You didn't get a lot when I was going through school, back when I was as an undergraduate. You would have your obligatory 1 lecture on thou shalt not steal from your company, but you didn't get a lot in terms of formal education. And in terms of today's curricula, or what they've been presenting in the last 6 to 8 years, you're getting even less in terms of ethics classes per se, and far more of inclusion into multiple classes. So instead of taking 1 class in ethics, which is easy to forget, You now take, for example, as a business major, let's say you're a new business major under this brand new curricula here, and you come in. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to take a class with us. It's Intro to Business. In there, you've got to make a resume that is targeted to a specific employer. I don't believe in gunshot resumes. I want it like a laser. Is it right to lie on it? How much exaggeration do you do? How much is right here? You know, and you start thinking about it. Then you go into marketing, fundamentals of marketing. Lovely class, fun class. Teach it, love it. Kids have a great time in it. There's a reason yeah, really. There's a reason our enrollment in marketing is 5 times what it was a year ago.
The course has become more attractive.
It's
then.
become more attractive. It's a lot more fun. It should. Marketing is, for me, marketing is fun. Marketing is what I have my doctorate in. For me, it is fun, and I try to make it fun. I try to make it enjoyable. I try to make you think. But part of the, there's always a question in marketing: is it right to do some of the things we do? Is it right to advertise to children? I mean, here we are, grocery shopping. I have 3, and it's down the cereal aisle.
Right.
Now, I can tell you what happens in our family, and in our family, I do the grocery shopping. Don't ask me why, it's just the way it works out. So I do the grocery shopping, and I tell the children they can pick whatever they have within a certain price range per pound. And I'm very careful that the stuff that's really high in sugar, which is, for some reason, over that limit. Haven't figured that out. But is it right to advertise, chocolate-coated sugar bombs? Some of the greatest successes in marketing are kind of borderline.
That's right. That's right. Raise some questions about nutritional content and whether people really should be spending their money. That brings up a question for me related to what, as an outsider, I see has happened in business curriculum. Now, you say when you did business studies, there really wasn't a focus on ethics as such. And my impression is that some of the questions about business people acting ethically perhaps come out of the period when Wall Street traders weren't acting ethically, or savings and loan institutions had problems, or more recently, tobacco companies have been hit with a lot more questions. So my impression is, as an outsider, that much of the concern about ethics in the business world and the appropriateness of an action, much of that concern comes from recent events, and there's not a history of examining ethical questions. Is that accurate?
Probably not. You can go back at least into the 1920s. In fact, I could go back into the 1870s, in the very least in the marketing literature. But there's always been concerns about what was right business behavior. In the early 1900s, in fact, you could talk in terms of what the idealized concept of what a good factory was.
And what was it back then?
Then you really had 2 classes of firms, and to a degree we still see this. You had the paternalistic concept, where the firm is your parent and we will take care of you. Now, you don't think of Henry Ford as being a very paternalistic person, and yet come the Great Depression, instead of firing half his workers, he put all of his workers on half-time. Now, there's a real difference between getting some paycheck in that time frame and getting no paycheck.
Okay.
And so, and this in return gets rewarded by a feedback from the employee. Now,
So there was some sense that that the common good and the good of the workers overruled at that point, say, the factory's bottom line.
okay, well here's a very good, very recent example. About a year and a half ago, in December on Christmas, remember there was a fabric factory that burned down?
Right.
Up in Pennsylvania, I believe it was?
It was up in the Northeast.
It was up in the
that's right.
Northeast. And what happened? Well, he didn't lay people off. The people got their regular paycheck. Now, when they came back to work, with a new factory, and mind you, a new factory is almost always more efficient. You know, think of their productivity level. Think of how they feel for this firm. You know, think of the interrelationship between the people, you know, between management and the employee, and it's closer to family. Now, you don't get that in many instances in terms of heavily unionized workforces. And the reason for that is because by its very nature, the negotiation process with unions tends to be adversarial. There's, you know, a winner and a loser. There's no we win.
Right.
And because there's no we win, that urge to cooperation, competition, kind of dissolves, goes away. And so that kind of firm concept isn't there. On the other hand, you know, there is a real concept, a real simple thing to think about in terms of business ethics. And, you know, wherever you feel like your ethics come from, and, you know, I happen to believe they're culturally, socioeconomically, how you're raised, a part of me. My ethics are mine. From the business perspective, it's good business to be ethical. Here's why. A business can't exist on a one-shot sale. You have to have repeat customers. And if you make the customers irate, you don't get another sale. You lose your customers. As soon as they have a chance, they're gone. There's no customer loyalty. And consequently, treating the customer right, ethically, has a positive effect on the bottom line.
Okay, a different sort of approach to begin with the welfare of the customer versus first looking at the bottom line. Okay.
Well, the two goals aren't mutually exclusive. You know, you can have, in this case, I think you can have your cake and eat it too. You know, the big hit on marketing right now is the thing called relationship marketing, which essentially says that if you're my customer, I'm going to take good care of you. Because if I take good care of you, you'll take good care of me.
Okay.
It's a commensual relationship. It's symbiotic. We both need each other to survive. If there are no businesses, think of this, all the things you purchase in a week, just, you know, go through them. Now, let's say you had to make a separate trip to every manufacturer, every supplier. I don't even have time for a hug with my wife.
That's right. That's right. That doesn't make any sense.
And consequently, I have to have that middleman. You know, don't go feeling that a middleman, a person in the middle. There's the problem. You know, the communists have had this. You know, if communism has fallen, capitalism is good. Oh, it will be wonderful. You've got 3 generations of people that were raised with the concept that profit is evil.
Okay. Hold on to that, and the rest of where you were going, we need to take a short break now, but we'll be back because there's obviously a lot more to talk about. In the second half of Austin Faith Dialogue, a lot more questions for our guest, Dr. Roy Cavanis from Houston-Tillotson, but stay with us. We'll be right back. We're glad you're here for the second half of Austin Faith Dialogue. Our guest today is Dr. Roy Cabanis, who is chair of the Division of Business at Huston-Tillotson College and a man with lots of ideas and opinions about the intersection of business and ethics. Roy, thanks. There's just not enough time for all the questions.
Here we go.
You teach at an undergraduate institution at Huston-Tillotson. I wonder if there are any particular things that you feel undergraduates must have as they get ready for further study, for opening their own businesses, for whatever, with a bachelor's degree.
Okay. Yeah, there's some things. What we're in the process of doing over at Huston-Tillotson is we are going for a national level of business school accreditation. Here in Austin, there are two schools that have some form of national business accreditation, those two being University of Texas and ACC. We're going for the same type of thing, and that ups our standards a lot. What do I feel a student has to have? A, good communication skills, absolutely crucial. B, technological competence. I can't put out a student in good faith and say to the businessman, hire this person, they will do you good, if they do not know the technology that is going to be out there. Doesn't mean they have to be using that particular piece of software, but I do want them to know that this is a computer and these are the common programs that I can expect to encounter. If I'm a marketing major, I need them to be able to do a presentation. I need them to be able to come on and interact, talk with you, talk clearly, communicate clearly, say what I'm going to be doing, why my product is good for you.
Okay.
They also have to be versatile enough not to be trapped in one channel, one thing, because you're going to change jobs. Average student, I think the last set of figures I heard is going to change jobs 7 times in their lifetime. That's after they get out of school.
Right. Now, what about what you want students to know or what the program provides for them in terms of how they make decisions in difficult business situations where there are some alternatives for how they might personally act or how they suggest that their business act?
Okay, here's where you're getting right to the heart of, the real question of what is ethical. And here's where you get to the point where I think, and this is personal opinion here, but I think the concept of teaching ethics has a difficult thing. Because if you say, I'm going to teach ethics, for one thing, you are presupposing that there is a single standard. And for another, if what I am having them do, if what they are doing is incongruous with their own internal sense of right and wrong, can they live, there's a mirror test. And the mirror test says, can I look at myself in the mirror in the morning and live with what I have done? And, realize that ethics fundamentally come from that individual sense of right and wrong.
So are you suggesting maybe that that students come away with the idea that ethical decisions in business are relative to what they think, what they know, what their situation
Well,
is?
you have two cultures here. Think of this. You have the culture that the student is raised with. At the same time, you also have what is called a corporate culture. If you find yourself in strong conflict with the corporate culture, in other words, the company does things I just can't deal with, I quit. You're better off going ahead and finding yourself a good fit because it's not worth it in your life. Your life is too short to be miserable by doing that. There's the simple line. Be willing to draw that line and say, so far, no further. And be willing to go ahead and take that. Now, that also comes to the point of taking a set of personal responsibility for your actions. And that is something that I am finding more and more that I am just simply going to insist upon happening. Evaluate your alternatives as the student, make your decision, and then live with it.
So if there's not at Huston-Tillotson a specific business ethics course, then how are students taught
Okay.
or encouraged to approach problems?
Okay, first of all, the vast majority of our courses are what could be considered, for want of a better term, hands-on. We are very practically oriented. So in other words, my Fundamentals of Marketing class, one of the things they will be doing in that class is there's going to be a couple of businesses that will come in. That business will come in and they will give them scenarios. And then we're going to work through those scenarios as to this is what you could have done. These were your options. You know, this was what you could have done, A, B, C, or D. Now, which set of options did you choose? And then let's examine the why, because the why here is far more important than the what.
Okay.
And that happens throughout the curriculum, not just in marketing, but in finance, in accounting. There's an old joke about accountants that, a student came in, went up for a job, and the man says, well, okay, I know you want to be hired here. What's 1 + 1? And the student looks at him and says, well, it's 2, sir. He says, okay, next. Next one comes in, what's 1 + 1? Well, it's 2, sir. Third one comes in, well, that's 1 + 1. Shuts the door. What do you want it to be?
Okay.
Now, there's a line here. Some students are not willing to cross it. And yet there clearly is that line.
Okay. So in various classes, students explore through real-world cases,
Absolutely.
basically, what is appropriate and what's not appropriate, and where that line is.
And in reality, one of the things I'm trying to make them do is to make them think about their own ethics. Because most of the time you don't realize, where do I stand on these things? How much thought have you really put in to, where do I stand? If a wallet drops in front of me, do I open it up, take the money, turn the wallet over to the person? Or do I just simply see whose it is and then call them? Where do you stand? You have to think about it in advance. It makes the decision later much easier.
True. I wonder if, as you and your students approach some of these questions, if you find that there's a difference in what the students are saying or where they're starting from, or where you are in the discussion, because Huston-Tillotson is affiliated with a couple of different Protestant denominations, so that it does have some central values in its purpose. And I wonder if that makes a difference in the interactions.
Good question. The answer is yes and no. Okay. And I think the reason I say it's yes and no is because for some students, for some people, their faith is such a core of their belief system, of what they are, of who they are, that, again, the concept of violating it is not inconceivable, but it is not an option, not really an option. And for others, I won't say their faith is weaker, but maybe their value set isn't as fixed, and realize that for me, I made the decision, part of what you do through a PhD program is you look at a lot of different philosophies, and I discarded relativism a long time ago. It's not all relative to me. I don't think that it can be to other people either, but I let them make their own decisions. I am going to, here's the example. I want you to learn yourself. I want you to learn what you are. And then, know thyself is a very good thing. The best rule for a business, when I'm talking in terms of them learning how to do a business, the best rule is the golden rule to a large degree.
Boy, that's true.
Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Not as they do unto you, but as you would want them to do unto you.
And that describes where you are and where the students are. Do you feel any influence, any suggestions on an institutional level, since Huston-Tillotson is denominationally related?
Not overtly. I have not seen, obviously none have come to me and said, thou shalt teach the following things. That has never occurred. So I won't say that there's been any overt influence through there. I wouldn't expect there to be.
Although it's nice that the students, some of them start out with that faith base. That is important.
Even if it's not faith-based, the source of it is immaterial with regards to how the student deals with it, because they're going to have to live with who they are and what they are a lot longer than they're going to have to live with me.
True, very true. Now, as the division grows and develops, you talked about this accreditation process. What difference is that likely to make in how ethical questions are presented, or what's presented?
A couple of very large differences. First of all, the rigor of what we're doing is probably going to double. I know the degree plan went from 33 hours to 54 hours. Of the 54 hours, 39 of them are mandated. In other words, you're going to cover these topics. One of those topics is ethics. And and it's going to be covered in multiple ways. The accrediting agency is very, very large on outcomes-based measures. In other words, they want to see there's some change which has taken place, a measurable, quantifiable change. When you tie that in with the fact that we are also now requiring all interns, all students are going to do an internship. Now, mind you, I set them up, and I don't believe in giving free labor. So these are all paid internships. And so far, last semester we had about 7 that we got set, and the rates of pay ranged from I think a couple of them were working at about $6, a couple of them were at 10, and I think one of them ended up at about 20 some odd an hour. For part-time labor, that's not too awful bad. And I make sure that what they're doing there, they're not, this is not coffee flunky time. If they ask you to once or twice, that's no biggie, but that shouldn't be part of your regular job routine. Your job routine is to learn the business, learn business things. Don't file, don't be secretary.
And therefore that experience just brings more back to the classroom, more issues to discuss, more for students to wrestle with while they're still in school.
And not only that, but then they can come back into class and you won't believe what they wanted me to do. Okay, now how do you deal with that? Okay, well, is it right? Is it not? Now, how much are they paying you? This is the $22 an hour intern.
Okay.
Now, it wasn't anything criminal or anything like that. It wasn't like fudge a set of books or anything like that. But it was in terms of, well, let's look at this and see if we can if that is a legitimate deduction here.
Business curriculum has come a long way. Thank you, Roy. And we hope this engenders some discussion with you and your business. Thank you for joining us this week on Austin Faith Dialogue. We'll see you next week.